Xie crossed the mountains of corpses and seas of blood to bring me back to the court and marry me. I originally thought that it was the deep love of youth, the bond that would never be abandoned even in life and death. Until Xie said to others, Shen Fu lost her innocence. I thought I didn't care, but I actually felt that she was dirty. Until he agreed to take a concubine and said that the woman was clean and innocent. I calmly burned the past written stroke by stroke in the struggle of forgetfulness and congratulated him on his good marriage. But he went crazy and asked me angrily why I didn't make a noise. He doesn't know, I can hardly remember him. The forgetfulness potion in my body made me forget him and forget love. 1. It snowed all night in Dingjing City. After the first snow, the sky suddenly cleared up. The sky was filled with golden and blue, and the curtains on the north building were rolled up high. I held onto the railing with both hands, looking towards the end of the long street with excitement, craning my head in anticipation. Xie went out to suppress bandits 3 months ago and returned to Beijing today. I should have greeted him at the gate of Xie's house, but we had not seen each other for such a long time that I could not help wanting to see him as soon as possible. The door curtain behind me rustled, and a sound with a long tail was heard. Who did I think it was? Isn't this Miss Shen, whom I haven't seen for a long time? I thought I would never see you outside again in this life, but I didn't expect you to have the nerve to come out so arrogantly. On a spring day, people in green shirts ride white horses, and red sleeves wave all over the building. The figure is bright, and the shadow is graceful. Since childhood, Xie has been admired by many noble ladies in Beijing. The daughter of Marquis Wooding, Su Yunmei, is one of them. Those standing with her were all people she had often met at banquets in the past. Another person smiled coquettishly. On that day, the Prince of Pingnan just said slut, and General Xie cut off his chin with one sword. Sister Mei, we can't talk about it. Su Yunmei smiled and snorted. He, Xie, can shut up one mouth. Can he shut up the mouths of many people? Yunmei Qianqian, don't be like this. I looked at her. She was wearing a goose yellow silk dress. She was slender and delicate. She timidly pulled Su Yunmei's sleeve. Wen Zhuqing, the legitimate daughter of Wen Yushi, was my brother's wife-to-be. But after my father and brother died in the battlefield, the Wen family immediately broke off the engagement and looked for another suitable match. This Tianzi-shaped private room was originally reserved by me a long time ago, but now anyone can enter. Facing everyone's gazes, I smiled and said, Miss Su, your brother Su Zhizhong retreated from the battlefield without fighting, abandoned his armor and fled, using his own body to block the enemy's arrows. You and Su Zhizhong both have the nerve to walk out with such a swagger, so why shouldn't I dare to do the same? In this Dingjing city, I am more qualified to go out than you. Very few people in the capital knew about Su Zhizhong's escape from the battlefield. It was Xie who accidentally revealed this to me. Su Yunmei clenched the fan in her hand, looked at the expressions of the noble ladies around her, and her face flushed instantly. Her tone was embarrassed and mixed with anger. She is talking nonsense, my brother didn't. I put away the things on the table, didn't want to say any more, turned around and left the Tianzi-shaped private room. When Xie returned from suppressing the bandits, he had to enter the palace through the official road and report to the emperor before he could return home. Now that I've been interrupted, I can only go back home and wait. Miss, they are really abominable. When the general returns home, I will tell him about the injustice you suffered outside. I only brought Chanta out today. She has an impatient personality. It's okay. There's no need to mention what happened today, so as not to make him worry. I shook my head and said lightly. She was outside the carriage, mumbling, The general loves you so much. He will definitely stand up for you. Just like before, if anyone said anything bad about you, the general would beat that person to a pulp. I looked out at the bustling street and smiled softly. It is precisely because he treats me well that I don't want him to worry about me. It is not easy for us to be like this. I don't want him to offend the powerful people in Beijing because of me again.
2.
Until the evening clouds came together, the cold wind blew, and the wind blew the jade under the eaves. I just heard the sound of horse hooves, looked up, and saw Xie hung in a black fox fur coat sitting steadily on a tall horse in the distance. However, for some reason, there was a plain carriage following him. I didn't think about him for a moment and just looked at him with joy. Xie Heng's mother was weak, so she had to wait inside the mansion. I was the only one waiting here with 2 maids. He tightened the reins and saw me standing in the snow with a frown on his face. The next moment, he got off his horse and clasped my hands in his warm palms. "Didn't I tell you it's cold? There's no need to wait outside." I smiled softly, my cheeks reddened by the reflection of the snow. "I wanted to see you earlier." At this moment, a slender hand suddenly stretched out from the carriage behind him, and a beautiful and elegant face emerged. She jumped off the carriage lightly, with a short sword hanging from her waist, and came to him with her clothes fluttering. "Xie Heng." She called him by his name. "Is this your wife?" "She is indeed the most beautiful woman in Dingjing. Even I am moved when I see her." Xie Heng ignored her and just looked at me. After a while, he said, "This is when she saved my life when I was fighting bandits. This time she is going to Beijing to look for her relatives and will stay at Xie's house temporarily. Xie Heng's savior should be treated with courtesy, so I smiled at her. Then I will ask someone to arrange a guest room." Xie Heng interrupted me and said in a cold voice, "No need. She is a distinguished guest, so she will stay in Xuanxiang Garden." I was stunned and stared at him blankly. Xie Heng subconsciously avoided my eyes. Logically speaking, only after Xie Heng took a concubine would the concubine live in the backyard. But Xie Heng never intended to take a concubine. So many gardens in the backyard were left empty. Xuanxiang Garden is the place closest to Xie Heng's study, apart from the main courtyard. Now, he wants Wenxi to live in Zhongxianjuan. I lowered my eyes, and the snow at my feet, like salt grains, stung my eyes so much that it caused pain. "Okay, I'll ask someone to arrange it." I heard my own voice, as pale as snow. After saying that, I tried to pull my hand out of Xie Heng's, but failed. I looked up at him. There seemed to be a flash of panic and fear in his eyes, and in a moment he was quickly submerged in the flying snow. The fine snow fell on his eyebrows, like a mountain of jade shattering. Finally, he slowly let go of my hand. 3. Xie Heng fought off the bandits and brought back a woman. It turned out that within half a day, the news had spread throughout the capital, and I was the only one who was foolishly and happily waiting for his return. But Xie Heng said that she was his savior, and she just came to Beijing to look for relatives. Since Xie Heng came, he has been repaying kindness and making friends with people all over the world. I believed him just because he saved my life. It was not like taking a concubine, as others said, nor was it like the new couple laughed while the old couple cried, as others said. The snow stopped again at night. I picked up a book and read it carefully by the candlelight. It records many things related to Xie Heng. I found the one that records his food preferences. It says that he doesn't like sweet food for midnight snacks and only likes a bowl of simple and pure bijianu tea. Chun Xing picked up the candle and said, "Miss, you are reading a book again. The lights are dim at night, and it is easy to hurt your eyes." In recent days, my amnesia symptoms seem to be getting worse. Even though I take medication every day, I still can't remember things from the past. During the days when Xie Heng was away fighting bandits, I would sometimes sit on the windowsill and suddenly wake up, not knowing where I was, and even less why I was waiting for a man named Xie Heng to return. At that time, I always took out this pile of books and read them one by one. They were the past that I wrote down stroke by stroke while my memory was still clear. For example, I want to make him a midnight snack tonight, but I can't remember what he likes to eat. The method of making by Jianyue is very complicated. It requires 2 tails of lotus stamens to be boiled over a slow fire for half an hour to bring out the fragrance. Then 1 tail of spring tea is added to it, and it is boiled. Then, dried tangerine peel is put in and simmered over a low fire. Finally, 3 drops of snow-covered peach blossom wine and 2 spoons of honey are added when it is 80% cooked. Finally, a wine warmer is used to make the aroma gather so that it will be fragrant and sweet when you drink it. The path leading to the study was dim, with the branches of the trees weighed down by the accumulated snow. Chun Sheng was holding a sheep-horn lantern to light the way ahead. "Madam, the general is discussing something with Lord Wen. I will go in and report it." I held the lunchbox and whispered, "No need, I'll go in by myself. You just stay outside." Like Wen Li and Xie Heng, they both learned martial arts from my father, so naturally they have a special relationship. The snow in front of the study door had been cleared away. As I stood there, I heard a sound from inside the door. It was Xie Heng's voice, slightly hoarse and subtly restrained. "Qianji," I thought. I didn't care that Shen Fu lost her innocence. I loved her so much. I thought I didn't care, but I can't do it. Whenever I face her at night, I will think she is dirty. The painting fell, and there was silence in the study, with only the faint sound of sobbing being audible. I lowered my head in panic, my whole body trembling. In an instant, tears seemed to break off and hit the back of my hands and the food box. I reached out to wipe it, but it just wouldn't come clean. Just like no matter how hard I try, I can't change the fact that Xie Heng regards me as a stain. Wen Li sighed and said leisurely, "It's human nature. In this world, which man can tolerate his wife being impure? Heng, listen to my advice. Find a pure girl to be your concubine. This will make up for your regrets." Xie Heng's voice was hesitant, but I promised her that there would be no one else in my life. Wen Li raised his voice slightly. "Things are different now. If I were her, I would have arranged for you to take a concubine a long time ago. She knows she has been wronged, so she should feel guilty and planned everything for you. Besides, you don't have to worry about her complaining. The Shen family is now in decline and the servants are scattered. She has no way out. Apart from you and the Xie family, she has nowhere else to go." I thought, at least Xie Heng didn't think so, but I never heard him speak again. This time, the study was silent for a long time, so long that my feet began to go numb when I stepped into the snow. 4. The man comes riding on his bamboo horse and plays with green plums around the bed. Xie Heng and I met in the autumn of the 12th year of Qingyuan. In the 17 years since then, no one else has taken notice. When I was just learning to speak, the first person I called was Daddy, and the second person was Xie Heng. For this reason, according to my father's recollection, my brother disliked Xie Heng for about 1 year and 3 months. I have been weak since childhood and have not been able to learn martial arts. My father is always worried that I will be bullied in the future when he and my brother are not around. Whenever this happened, Xie Heng would always hold his head high and say, "I know martial arts. I will learn the best and protect Afu forever." The brother was furious. "Afu is my sister. What does it have to do with you? I don't need you to protect her." I thought it was just a child's joke, but Xie Heng never broke his promise. When I was 10 years old, I went hunting with my father and accidentally fell into a cave. It was Xie Heng who found me. He carried me on his back for several miles in the heavy snow. When he took off his shoes, the blood on his feet melted into the snow. At the age of 12, when I was wearing golden hairpins and had just started to wear new makeup, many young men in the capital wore wedding gowns and said that I was too beautiful and vulgar to be a wife of a wealthy family. Xie Heng came out of the house with a gun in his hand and beat them badly while chatting and laughing. At that time, they said that Xie Heng was a wolf dog raised by Shinjia Afu, and he bit people very fiercely. The falling leaves of the phoenix tree are like butterflies. He and I sit under the threshold of the tree, enjoying the gentle breeze. I applied the medicine to him in the bright sunlight. Let them say it. Why have I ever been afraid? You must be so arrogant. Hiss! The corner of his mouth twitched, and he laughed loudly. They deserved a beating. They deserved it. As the years go by, the flowers in the yard have fallen for several years, and the trees have grown tall and majestic like a canopy. Countless times later, there was a cliff in front and an abyss on the side. Xie Heng, always behind me. I must be with you for the rest of my life. I only want Shen's wife in my life. I swear here that I will use my flesh and blood to protect her from the wind and rain and keep her worry-free for the rest of her life. I will never let her down. Only one person in this life. Love is deep and never stops. As a bride, dressed in red, I have imagined countless times the scene of marrying Xie. I thought about how my cheeks turned red when he lifted the veil. I've thought about seeing his eyes full of affection when we were drinking together. However, when that night actually came, everything was different. I sat on the edge of the bed, but all I got was a drunk Xie. I opened the bridal veil with my own hands, and Xieheng's tall body curled up, lying on his side on my lap. His mind was scattered, his eyes were filled with panic, tears fell drop by drop, and he kept repeating, "Faster. Why can't it be faster, just faster?" I wiped the tears from his face and hugged his trembling shoulders. "Yes, faster, faster, it will be fine. In fact, it's only 1 month away, just 1 month away." 5. 2 years ago, my father and brother died in battle, and countless soldiers in the city were killed or wounded. Only then were we able to stop the Western D coalition forces at Hulao Pass. At that time, the two armies had been at loggerheads for a long time, and neither side had a chance of winning if they fought again. The Western D were unwilling to withdraw their troops in this way, so they proposed to our dynasty to make peace with the emperor and withdraw their troops. Most of the sons and brothers of the king of Shidi were killed by my father and brothers. They regarded the Shen family as a ferocious tiger and specifically requested that Shen Shalu's daughter go to Shidi to marry. No one would stop such an exchange. Only one person would be needed to bring about a truce. She's an orphan, so just give her away. At that time, Xie was still fighting bloody battles at the border of Shidi. He sent an urgent military report of 800 miles to Dingjing, asking for only one thing. All the sons of the Shen family died in the battle, and if the orphan girl was sent to marry, it might discourage the army. It only takes 1 month and another month, and I will retreat to Shidi and ask your majesty to keep Shen Fu. The emperor of our dynasty was afraid that the Western D would regret it, so he quickly issued an edict asking me to marry the princess, and there was no time to lose. I thought, this is about the last thing I can do. I'm afraid Xie will be like my father and brother. The sooner I leave, the sooner he can return home safely. When the marriage team was leaving Dingjing, an express military report from 800 miles away had just arrived over the Camel Mountains. When the marriage team crossed the Jinshu River, the expedited military report from 800 miles away had already been sent out of Qinmeng Pass. When the marriage team arrived at the camp of the king of Shidi, the expedited military report of 800 miles was stopped outside the imperial city. I thought I would never return to my hometown in my lifetime. Half a year later, Xie bypassed Dayue and went straight to Shidi. He came to take me home. They said that Xie worked day and night to conquer Shidi and did not dare to rest for a moment. They said that Xie had broken his leg in the spring in order to refute the emperor's request that he lead troops into battle. They said that the scar under Xieheng's brow had exposed his flesh and bones. The Shidi people used my information as a threat and pierced this place with a long arrow. The procession back to the court that year was particularly ostentatious. Those who had praised me for my Shen family character and seen me off along the long street when I got married now began to criticize and talk about me. They said that I was not worthy of Xie and that if I had known myself well, I should have spent the rest of my life with the green lamp and the ancient Buddha. Xie said to me, "Afu, you are the bravest woman in the world." He was not afraid of what others would say and fulfilled the promise he made that day. "Afu, I said I would marry you." I thought he came to redeem me, but I didn't expect it to be just another hell. 6. I thought about it for a long time before I remembered the injury on Xieheng's palm when he woke up in the morning on the day of the wedding candles. That night, I had sex for the first time. Xie was a martial artist. I was in so much pain that I fell asleep at night. Until I woke up in the morning, I saw Xie cut his palm with a knife and dripped blood on the handkerchief. Then I realized that I didn't have my period last night. But last night was clearly my first night. King Shidi hated the Shen family so much that he put me in a cage as a reward. The Shidi dynasty advocated the use of force, and the eldest prince and the third prince were strong candidates for the throne. And I am one of the rewards of the throne. Whoever can seize the throne can get me. However, The battle for the throne failed, so Xie went to Shidi. His armor and hair were covered in blood, like a demon that had emerged from a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. But when she saw me, her eyes were red. "Afyu, I'm here to take you home. I don't know why I didn't have any period. Why do other women have their period on their wedding night, but I don't?" I grabbed Xie arm in panic, suppressed the bitterness in my nose, and explained to him. No one touched me. When I was in Shidi, I hadn't had time to be rewarded. I am clean, I don't know. "Afyu," he interrupted me, trying to smile. "I believe you. Maybe it's me, I won't. But if I don't get red on my wedding night, I'm afraid there will be gossip. I have thick skin and flesh, it's just a few drops of blood. What are you afraid of? Stop crying, dear." We were all confused and panicked. Therefore, I never thought about it. Who in this world would believe that a woman who had been married off to a foreign country could be a virgin? Even now I can still remember the ambiguous smile on Xie mother's face when she saw the blood-stained handkerchief. It made my scalp tingle and my whole body tremble. But I didn't care at that time. I just wanted Xie to trust me. I thought he believed in me. But later on, he was always busy with official duties and had to stay overnight in the study. Even in the second month after his wedding, he asked for permission to go out and suppress bandits and did not return for several months. Then I remembered that he had never touched me since our wedding day. I thought he felt sorry for me, but I didn't expect that he just thought I was dirty. 7. I am not dirty. The clear moonlight splashed all over the floor. I didn't know what to wash, so I just rubbed my hands desperately. Chun-Xing cried, Miss, you can't wash anymore. Your hands are all rubbed raw." Chuntao and Chun-Xing have been my personal maids since they were young. Before the marriage, I used the money at home to send them away. After I came back, Xie went to Chongling and Yuchuan to find them for me. Chun-Xing. I let her wipe her hands, a little confused. "Where is this? Why is it different from my lady's room?" She paused while wiping and patiently explained again and again. "This is the residence of General Xie. Miss, you have already married General Xie and are now in your private room." I nodded, and a lot of memories came back to me. The eldest princess of Shidi had made things difficult for me many times. She was good at using snakes and medicine, and always tested the new medicine she developed on me. Even she herself couldn't explain what kind of medicine I took or what kind of insects I planted that caused me to have amnesia. But this amnesia only affects love matters. Later, when she saw that I was about to leave, she kindly gave me a prescription, saying that it could suppress the effect of the drugs in the body. "Chun-Xing, please help me get a brazier." I picked out a book from a pile of books on the bookshelf. When I opened it, I saw that it was about the time when Xie and I traveled around the south of the Yangtze River with Xie's mother when we were 10 years old. Chuntao cried out in surprise. "Miss, you usually cherish these books so much. Why do you want to burn them?" The flames devoured the corners of the book, and I just watched quietly, as if watching the past turn to ashes. When Xie arrived, the book had burned to the last page, and in the swirling flames, there were 3 words, lol. He must have seen it, but didn't care. "What are you doing?" He spoke softly and comforted me. He squatted down and looked at me, his moon-white fox fur hanging on the ground. I lowered my eyes and looked at him, and it took me a long time to remember that I had just gone to the study. I pointed at Bai Jianyue's tea box and whispered, "I wanted to give it to you, but I spilled the tea as soon as I left the house." He followed my finger, glanced at the ground, and said distressfully, "From now on, just let the servants do this kind of thing." I glanced sideways and saw the same festive red bed. I asked him, "Are you going to rest in the room tonight?" Xie pursed his lips and was silent for a while. There are still many details to be sorted out regarding the bandit issue. The emperor is still waiting. I turned my face slightly, and Xieheng's kiss only landed on the corner of my lips. I felt a little nauseous, but I couldn't reach out to wipe it off. His slightly bent body stiffened for a moment, and his palms, which were supporting the table, tightened until veins bulged. His words in the study just now came to my mind again, and I looked at him deeply. "Xie, do you regret marrying me?" His expression froze, his eyes flickered. How could that be? Marrying you is my lifelong wish. I love you so much. How could I regret it? Maybe it was a mixture of love words and lies, and he kept saying them for a long time until even he himself began to believe them. But I don't believe it. Since he has made his decision in his heart, I will fulfill it. After parting, both sides will be happy.
8.
At this time, a servant came to report. General, Miss Wen from Xuanxiang Garden said, she has something important to discuss with you. I looked up at him, feeling extremely sad. I didn't know how to start, thinking, I have a lot of money. I can give her, find her the best and in guards. Can you let her leave Xie's house? At least, can you give me some dignity before I leave? Xie shook his head and said, she doesn't stay at the inn. During the confrontation, Chunxing, holding a bowl of medicine, immediately lowered her head and turned around when she saw the situation. Stop. Xie stopped her and asked me, why are you taking medicine? I'm sick. I didn't intend to hide it and said lightly, if I don't take the medicine, I will forget you. He was stunned at first, and then a hidden smile flashed across his lips. Affu, don't use these little tricks. You used to be the worst at lying. I knew he had something in mind. He felt that I was lying to him when I told him I was innocent on our wedding day. There is nothing innocent between me and Miss Wen. You don't need to worry about it. Don't make trouble with me. He turned and walked out into the snowy night, walking very quickly, as if he hated this place and hated me. I think that he is different from others in that he is open-minded and has a deep understanding of life and death. I held my forehead with my hands. I was smiling at first, but as I smiled, tears started to flow down my face. I stood up, poured out the bowl of medicine, and stood quietly. Chunxing looked at me with a worried look on her face. Miss. I looked out the window. The moon was high and cold. Chunxing, I really like him. In my 18 years, I have only loved him. We met in a clear and sunny place, and met again in the abyss. But I can hardly remember what it feels like to like him.
9.
Early the next morning, the servant reported that Miss Wenxi from Xuanxiang Garden wanted to see her. I heard that the lady and the general had an argument yesterday because of me. It was just a few arguments last night, and it happened in my room. The servants in the inner courtyard would never dare to spread the news, so Xie could only tell her. A night passed. She had a heating pad in her hands and a fine fox scarf around her neck. Seeing that I didn't reply, she said to herself, Madam, please don't worry. I just treat the general as my elder brother. There is nothing wrong between him and me. Don't listen to what others say. Even if General Xie shamelessly wants to take a concubine, I still don't want to. I grew up in the countryside and am used to being carefree. I also act like a man, which is not as delicate and tactful as you ladies. Moreover, I have been with General Xie for the past few months. He has been disregarding my respect for me, which makes me feel a little confused. I hope that Madam will be more lenient with me. Perhaps she was too sincere and too frank, and I actually felt a little ashamed of my previous assumptions about her. For me, after experiencing the marriage, I realized how difficult life is for women in this world. Sometimes just a few casual words can push a woman into the abyss, so I always want to love them more. I smiled softly and was about to speak when a tall figure blocked out the entire light. When I looked up, I saw Xie, wearing a black cloak with a stern face and a frown, standing in front of me, separating me from Wenxi. His tone was very stiff, and he said to Wenxi coldly, Did I tell you not to come to the inner courtyard and not to disturb her? Wenxi snorted, not afraid of him. Why are you so stingy? Are you afraid that I will eat your wife? I love such a big beauty so much. As he spoke, he leaned over and winked at me. Watching the two of them bickering with each other as if no one was around, I knew it was wrong, but I still felt unhappy. Xie said succinctly, Go back. Don't make me say it a second time. When she glanced at him, turned and left. He turned around and subconsciously wanted to hold my hand, but I avoided him. He looked down at his hand that was suspended in midair and slowly withdrew it. When did you and I become so distant? I didn't reply to him. I smiled faintly and said, Xie, let's get divorced. Kunlun is about to tilt, and Buzhou is about to fall. The wind blew up the fine snow and hid it in his clothes. He lowered his head and swept away the irritating snow, but he couldn't sweep it away completely, and his brows were filled with anxiety. Only then did he have time to ask me, "But what did Wenxi tell you?" I shook my head and was about to speak, but he seemed unwilling to listen and interrupted me. "Afu, I have been by your side since you were a toddler. Even the little kids in Dingjing know that Shen's Afu and Xie have been childhood sweethearts. Xie, will only have you as my wife in this life. If you divorce me, how will you survive in Dingjing? Don't get angry with me. I risked my life to bring you back to the capital that day. I will protect you for the rest of your life and will never let you feel anxious." My mind was actually in a mess, and I couldn't remember whether what he said about our childhood sweethearts was true or not. "I have a place to go. You don't have to worry.
Just agree to divorce me.
After you divorce me, you can marry a new wife and concubines without being bound by any rules." "Take a concubine?" He clamped my wrist with his 5 fingers. His calm expression finally broke, and there was anger in his eyes. "You want to push me to someone else?" I recalled the conversation between him and Wenli in the study. This was exactly what he had been thinking about, so why was he angry? I frowned and pulled my hand back. "If you don't have a girl that suits your taste, don't be in a hurry. Take your time to look for one." "Shen Fu." He interrupted me, his eyes suddenly reddened, his teeth trembling. "What are you doing? We said we would be together forever. Have you forgotten?" I looked at him in a daze, and for a moment I couldn't remember when I had said this. However, which woman in this world would dare to ask her husband to do this? I wouldn't dare to do that either. I whispered, "Where did you hear such an unreasonable oath? It has never existed since ancient times, and I will not ask my husband to do this for me. Actually, I just didn't know that I had forgotten a lot of things. Now, I only regard Xie as an ordinary husband, not the one I promised myself to be." Xie smiled with red eyes and took a step back. "Okay, since it is your wish, I will do as you say." "Shen Fu, don't regret it." He was extremely angry, and when he left, his servants retreated away from him with trembling legs. Xieheng's anger did not affect me. After all, I don't want him anymore. What does it have to do with me if he gets angry?
10.
After a few days, I heard that Miss Wenxi from Zhangxianjiwen had found her relatives in Dingjing. At the same time, news came that Xie was going to take a concubine. I just don't know which girl he is marrying. There really isn't any deep hatred between Xie and I. If it weren't for him, I would have turned into a handful of earth in this life, or maybe my soul would have been carried back to my hometown by a whirlwind. We were young and in love, but it is fate that has made us end up like this today. We have no choice but to do so. Chun Xing squatted by the stove, wiping her tears silently. "Don't cry. After Xie Hengyi and I get divorced, we will go back to Lingchuan, which is Anyang's hometown." She raised her head and sighed. "When the general and the young master were here, they all said that my aunt was a good person and worthy of trust, but who would have thought?" I lowered my head, and the page in my hand that read, 10 Years Old Lantern Festival, was written on it. I threw it in without hesitation. "Chun Xing, people's hearts are fickle, and things in the world are unpredictable. In this world, no one can be relied on forever. What others give you is up to them to take and give. If you only rely on these empty things all day long, that would be really terrible. If you want to stand up, you must first stand up for yourself and entrust yourself to yourself. Anyone can abandon you, but you won't." Chun Xing looked embarrassed. She knew she didn't understand, so she didn't get tangled up. But what if General Xie doesn't agree to divorce? I smiled and said, "You forgot that before Dad passed away, he left the late Emperor's decree to me." Her pupils suddenly dilated, and her lips trembled. Then why didn't you take it out when you were getting married? If you had taken out the imperial decree, no one would have dared to force you to go." Silly Chunxing, I whispered. Shen family children are strong and will never be deserters on the battlefield. Daddy and brother died to protect the country. The glory and loyalty of the Shen family are their responsibility, and also my responsibility. Not only is the Iron Horse and Blood River a battlefield, but the marriage is also a war without gunpowder. As a daughter of the Shen family, how can I retreat? How can I escape? I should protect the mountains and rivers protected by my father and brother. My father was a rough man. All his life, he only knew how to protect his country in armor. It is said that when he died, he was pierced by thousands of arrows, but he was standing and refused to kneel before the enemy. In his entire life, he only had my mother as his wife. He never took a concubine or a maid. The relationship between him and my mother was my first understanding of what a couple in the world looks like. When my mother was 8 months pregnant with me, she heard that my father was missing on the battlefield, and she was frightened. As a result, she was born with a disease and passed away when I was 3 years old. Later, my father, a rough man, raised my brother and me with great difficulty. When he couldn't pull it over, he secretly shed tears in front of my mother's tablet. Yunyang, Fuer had a high fever again yesterday. I didn't know what to do. If you saw this, please pray that Xiaoguai grows up safe and healthy. Yunyang, the older Fuer gets, the more she looks like you. I miss you so much. He wrote letter after letter to his Yunyang and burned them, just like the letters he wrote home from the battlefield in the past. He wrote about how naughty children are. When he saw the book, he said, I was already sleepy. He wrote that his little daughter ate half a bowl of rice more today, and he was very happy. On the day when they got engaged, the young lady deliberately slowed down half a step behind the others at Dinga Bridge, just to wait for him to catch up. He wrote, Yunyang, could you please walk a little slower on the bridge? He disliked Xie Heng at first and even taught him martial arts in the training ground, just because he didn't want me to see him too often. Xie Heng has been trying to win his favor for 10 years. Even when he was on the battlefield, he kept saying, after this triumphant return, Daddy will give him one last test. Only if he passes it can he marry my Fuer. Perhaps knowing that the journey would be dangerous, he took out the imperial edict from UCI and handed it to me. He didn't know what the future held. He only knew that he had to protect me. Before he passed away, he reminded me, live and be selfish. He spent his whole life serving the public and shed blood for the world. His daughter should not bear the consequences. But he didn't know that the people of the world he protected with his life, who were enjoying the peaceful country he guarded, could not accommodate his most beloved daughter. 11. I heard that Heng wants to take a concubine. You don't object. Xie Heng's mother leaned on the pearwood chair, looking graceful and elegant, and glanced at me with a smile. Yes. I replied calmly. That's how it should be. He protected you before, and I couldn't say a word to you. Now that he has come to terms with it, it's a good thing. What do you think? Xie Heng's mother never liked me very much, and even thought at one point that I had seduced Xie Heng to the point of turning his head away at a young age. If Xie Heng had not threatened to commit suicide, how could she have given in? After the marriage turmoil, Xie Heng insisted on marrying me despite what others said. The Shen family had been loyal for generations, and all the men had died in battle, leaving only an orphan like me. Marrying me was considered an act of righteousness. She couldn't stop it, nor did she dare to stop it, but she just hated me more. Madam, if you have anything to say, please speak directly. Xie Heng is not here. There is no need for us to act. She straightened her body and said, Wen Si is now 2 months pregnant. To avoid speculation from outsiders, she will choose an auspicious day to enter the mansion immediately. As the mistress, you should take good care of her. This is the first grandson of my Xie family, and there can be no mistakes. First, Xie Heng wanted to take Wen Si as his concubine, and then Wen Si became pregnant. For a moment, I was a little stunned. Whose child? I don't know if it was an illusion, but when Mrs. Xie saw my expression change, she actually revealed a strange smile. Of course it's Henger's. How come he hasn't told you yet? This child must be a surprise for you. After all, You are his first child, and he will have to call you mother in the future. When I walked out of Xie's mother's Hengshui residence and almost collapsed, I held onto the pillar with one hand and felt a wave of chills sweeping through my whole body. Everything was silent. I could hear my own rapid breathing and the beating of my chest that seemed to be about to burst through my body. I know that this is not sadness, but anger and hatred for being deceived.
12.
This is the first time I have taken the initiative to look for Xie Heng in all these days. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he walked towards me quickly. "F you." With a slap, I raised my arm and slapped him hard on the face, using all my strength. "Xie Heng, what a good move, retreating to advance, secretly attacking Qinsong. Is this what you call a clean record?" He ignored the pain on his face and grabbed my arm in panic. "F you, listen to my explanation." At this moment, when she suddenly appeared from behind him, rushed forward, and slapped me hard. She opened her arms to protect him behind her.
She was no longer friendly, as she was that day.
Instead, she asked me fiercely, "Why did you hit him?" She slapped me so hard that my ears were buzzing. When I came to my senses, I raised my hand to slap her back. At this time, Xie Heng raised his hand to block my slap and pushed her behind him with one hand. He subconsciously said, "F you, she is still pregnant." Xie Heng grabbed my right hand, and I raised my left hand and slapped him back. When she became anxious again, perhaps this was her true face. "Miss Shen, if you have anything to be angry about, just come to me. Xie Heng kept this a secret for your sake. As long as I get married, everything will go smoothly. Why can't you just pretend you don't know?" Xie Heng interrupted her. "That's enough. Someone show her away. Without my order, she is not allowed to set foot in the Xie family." When she turned around and looked at him in disbelief. "Xie Heng, what do you mean? You and I are going to get married soon, and I'm pregnant with your child." Xie Heng clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white, and dragged the man out of the door with a cold face. "How did this child get here? Do you want me to help you recall?" My palms ached slightly, and the sunlight shining on my body did not provide any warmth. I lowered my head, feeling confused, not understanding why someone would hurt someone. My brother once said that if I was bullied, I could fight back and he would always stand up for me. But now that my brother is gone, I actually dared to hit people at will. I sighed and decided not to do this next time. Walking through the corridor, at the hanging flower gate, Xie Heng's mother, supported by her grandmother, slowly spoke. "Do you know why Henge wants to take a concubine? He told me that Miss Wen is clean and innocent, and is from a good family. He is brave and good at fighting, with outstanding achievements, and is the best man in the world. But you, Shen Fu, have become a stain that makes him ridiculed and criticized. You are like a fly crawling on his clothes, which does not hurt or itch, but makes people unable to swallow. He deserves a clean and innocent woman, not to keep that ridiculous oath for you." Madame Xie tore off the bodhisattva mask and spoke with every word with a heartbreaking and merciless heart. When I first heard Xie Heng mention the word innocence, my heart ached, but now I have figured it out. Once a woman loses her innocence, no one cares why she lost it, whether she was victimized or humiliated, whether it was for the country or for her family, no one cares. All they cared about was that she had lost her innocence and that she was worthless. Innocence may be important, but it is not important either. Even if I really lost it, to me it is a medal of honor, not a brand of shame. At this time, I listened to her long speech again, just for my Shen family. "Madam, do you still remember who taught Xie Heng all his military strategies and abilities in marching and fighting? My father taught him everything since he was 5 years old. In his first year on the battlefield, he fell into the enemy's trap alone, and it was my brother who saved him and brought him back to the camp regardless of his own safety. Even if I am not Xie Heng's wife at this time, my Shen family has also given him a second life, and Madam should not speak so harshly. I have always been unable to figure it out, but did I offend Madam unintentionally when I was young?" She laughed a few times, and as she passed by me, she whispered, "You are just like your mother, a disgusting bastard." I turned my head sharply to look at her, and when she passed by me, I grabbed her and slapped her hard in the face. "Shen Fu, how outrageous you are!" She covered her face and looked at me in disbelief. "If I hear you say anything insulting about my mother again, I will beat you even harder." I looked at her coldly, without any fear. At the end, I said, "In the past, I just thought people were talking nonsense behind my back, but today I finally understand that everything they said is true." Hearing this, she forgot to cover her face and asked nonchalantly, "What do you mean?
Who said that to me? Who are they?"
"My mother is the daughter of a merchant, and Madame Xie is the legitimate daughter of Duke Dinghua. I heard earlier that she had a crush on my father when she was young, but I didn't expect that my father would rather marry a merchant's daughter than her. So, it was rumored that she had been at odds with my mother for many years. Maybe she pretended to be too good, and in front of the world, she always looked sad and dignified. Even my father thought it was nonsense, but seeing her acting like this today, it was not only inappropriate, she hated my mother so much." 13. That night, I threw all my notes into the stove, and a blazing flame ignited. Xie Heng had been standing in the snow for an hour. He said he came to apologize to me. I didn't open the door, and he just stood there stubbornly. Just like that year, when he went into a brothel to investigate a case and I misunderstood him, he stood there like this and insisted on explaining to me. But why is there any need to explain each and every one of these piles today? "Afu, you should know that I was just angry that you said you wanted a divorce. I was thinking if you saw me taking someone else as a concubine, would you be jealous? From the beginning to the end, you are the only one in my heart. What happened to Wenxi was my fault, but she is a girl from an innocent family. No matter what the cause and effect is, I should be responsible for her. I promise you, she can't ruin our friendship. Whether she comes in or not, we will still be the same as before, okay?" Day after day, he saw that I stayed at home with nowhere to go, and he no longer mentioned the word divorce, and he felt relieved. "Don't you know that I am not an official appointed by the imperial court and have no right to meet His Majesty in private? I have the imperial edict in my hand and can only wait for the opportunity." It was not until the day of the spring feast that I followed him into the palace. In just 2 years, the Dingjing Palace was no longer in the miserable situation it once was, where no one dared to speak out. The pipa plays and the music plays, but no one has ever collected the bones since ancient times. It has been the case since ancient times that peace is brought about by generals, and generals are not allowed to see peace. After 3 rounds of drinks, I stood up calmly. Xie Heng, who was sitting nearby, seemed to have a premonition and hurriedly called out in a low voice, "Afu, what are you going to do?" He quickly reached out his hand, but his 5 fingers just slid quietly across the end of my skirt. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, I took out the old imperial edict from my arms and held it high above my head. "I pay my respects to your majesty. I am the daughter of Shen Shilu, Shen Fu of the Shen family. In September of the 11th year of Qingyuan, I was ordered to marry the Western Di people. In May of last year, I returned to the capital and married Xie Heng, the general of Xianyuan. However, time has passed, things have changed, and people have changed. Between me and General Xie, we are destined to be together, but not to be together. Water is unfixed, flowers have their ends. Today, I am here to ask your majesty to allow me and General Xie to divorce." 14. As soon as he finished speaking, the sounds of stringed instruments and bamboo pipes stopped for a moment. Xie Heng hid his hands under his wide official robe, clenching them so tightly that his fingertips turned white. He was as motionless as a sculpture, just watching quietly, that thin and frail figure crawling on the ground, crying loudly, each word indicating that he would never see her again in this life. The emperor on the throne was drunk and asked others with a smile, "Who is Shen Fu?" I sneered in my heart. The imperial family is the most profit-oriented and ruthless. He probably doesn't remember either Shen Fu or the Shen family. The eunuch whispered in his ear for a long while before he raised his hand and said, "Stand up, since it is the late emperor's decree." "Your Majesty." At this time, Xie Heng stood beside me. "I have no intention of divorce." "Thank you, my dear minister." The emperor narrowed his eyes. Are you going to disobey the order of the late emperor? Xie pursed his lips and held my hand tightly. I dare not. It's just that there are some conflicts between me and my wife. We haven't come to this point. Please, Your Majesty, don't respond to the imperial decree. If the imperial decree comes down, he will have no way out. Xie is different from my father. My father is loyal to the king and serves the world, even if the king is cruel. However, Xie was arrogant and had a hot temper. He never shied away from confrontation. If no one was alert, such a character would sooner or later cause trouble. I brushed my cuffs. None of this had anything to do with me anymore. You are lucky that General Xie was willing to marry you. I heard that you wanted to divorce him because he wanted to take a concubine. Mrs. Xie's heart is not like that of a loyal and righteous person. Instead, she has some petty family style, which is not presentable. I looked in the direction of the voice and saw that the person who said this was the head of Anping County, and sitting next to her was Wen Shi. Xie glanced at her sideways and said, "When did I allow you to talk too much when I was talking to the emperor? Is this how Lord Song disciplines his daughter?" The old man who was called glared at his daughter with an ugly expression. I stood up and bowed to him. "Your Majesty, may I ask you a few words?" He waved his hands and said, "Go ahead, I forgive you." I faced everyone and said frankly, "Since I returned from marriage, there have been many gossips about me in the capital. I never paid attention to it, and I never thought that the words of the emperors would make me cowardly or disgusting. But some people use me as a target to stab my Shen family. The Shen family has made many military achievements since the reign of the previous emperor. 10 years ago, my grandfather retired from the army and returned to the fields. The border was in danger, and my father and brother were stationed in the western border. There were no capable generals in the court. He went north to repel the enemy at an old age, but he died on the way back to the capital before he could reach his hometown. 2 years ago, the Western D joined forces with the Mang and Gyue tribes to invade the country. At that time, there was no food or grass inside and no reinforcements from outside. My father and brothers defended the city for 49 days and sacrificed their lives for the country. They stopped the enemy troops outside the border and prevented them from entering the border to massacre the city. They defended 49 border cities. Although I am a woman, I never retreated when the country was in danger. I never looked back on my journey north to marry a foreign prince, and I have never regretted it to this day. The bones are in the sand, but the mountains and rivers are intact. This is the Shen family's explanation to the people of the world. The Shen family is worthy of heaven and earth, and is worthy of the common people. Like the cry of a wild oriole, every word is full of tears. History is written in blood, recording that my Shen family has been loyal for generations, with all the men dying in battle. Among the audience were my father's old friends and children who had heard of his reputation for loyalty and righteousness. All of them covered their faces and shed tears. The noble concubine on the right of the throne looked at me deeply and said, "Your Majesty, there is only this one person left in the gate of loyalty and bravery. Please save her." The emperor was silent for a while, then made a final decision. "I grant your request. I will also issue an edict to confer posthumous titles and noble titles on Shen Shilu and Shen Mingyu, and to confer the title of Yonglin Township Lord on Shen Fu, with a fief of 800 households. From now on, anyone who dares to bully you will be defying the emperor's authority. Thank you, Your Majesty." 15. After I spoke those words in the temple, Xie never spoke again. When we arrived at the palace gate, the snow was falling again. Xie stood in front of my carriage, with a thin layer of snow on his shoulders. "Afyu, I just did one thing wrong. Is it so unforgivable? Have I been bad to you over the past 10 years? I gave you my life. Can't you tolerate the slightest mistake of mine?" I stared at the car curtain, and even the words Xie were a little blurry in my mind. Xie continued, "The incident with Wen Shi was caused by me losing control after drinking. It was my fault. I mistook her for you. She is a bit like you. The first time I saw her, I only thought of you." I finally regained some of my memories, opened the curtain, and saw Xie with pale lips. You said she looks like me? Xie, when have I ever been so despicable in your heart? When have I ever had an affair with someone without a matchmaker? When have I ever been full of lies, two-faced and shameless? Xie, you didn't want to touch me, but you wanted to touch when she who you mistook for me. When you touched her, didn't you feel dirty? Xiaheng's cold and hard expression suddenly shattered. He could no longer remain calm. He was extremely panicked. I continued, whether Wenxi was there or not, when you said those words that day, our relationship had already come to an end. He explained in a panic. That was just a spur-of-the-moment statement. It was not what I really thought. I was confused at the moment, and that's why I said that. I interrupted him. Xie, do you know why I followed you back that day even though I knew it was a hard road? Because I believed in you, loved you, and bet that you would remain true to me. Obviously, I lost the bet. Life is like a game of chess. Don't regret your moves. I have no regrets for every step I take. I still can't explain why I didn't have any blood on my wedding night. His body trembled, as if a gust of wind would cover him with wounds. I believe you. I believe you. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. Once upon a time, what I feared most was the word innocence. But now I understand that the best way to deal with the fear of something is to face it head-on, be prepared to be torn to pieces, and then live with integrity. When we were young, you and I read the story of Miss Song Sand, who traveled thousands of miles to save her husband. At that time, you would also shout, "A woman's chastity is never beneath her skirt." You would also admire Miss Song Sand's righteousness, but that was because you were not involved and had nothing to gain or lose. Now that you are involved, you begin to reflect, reject, and overturn this truth, because it is like a sharp knife stabbing you and causing you to suffer losses. You no longer shout that this is the truth. You have become like everyone else, feeling insulted because your wife did not bleed on your wedding night. You're not just selfish, you're despicable. Xie, it's not me that's dirty, it's your heart that's dirty. There is no such thing as empathy in this world. Even women find it difficult to empathize with other women, let alone men. Xie grabbed the side of the carriage with his 5 fingers, resisting, his fingers bleeding, and looked at me stubbornly. "Afu, please don't leave." In the past, when he did something wrong, he would hurt himself to make me soft-hearted. I watched him coldly, raise my foot, and kicked him in the chest when he was not prepared. On that day, the brave and outstanding General Xie lay on the ground like a bereaved dog, becoming a laughingstock in the entire Dingjing.
16.
With the emperor's will, no one dares to stop me from going to Lingchuan. On the day of departure, I met an unexpected person at Shirley Chongding. Wen Zhuqing, wearing a light green silk dress, stood aside. Her face was plain and white, but her features were still delicate. "Afu," she whispered, holding a sachet in her hand, "you have been subjected to gossip since you returned to Beijing. I am a coward and dare not say a word to defend you. If your brother saw this, he would blame me. My brother has a cold personality and never says anything to other women except me. But when he occasionally mentioned his young wife who had not yet married into the family, there would always be a hint of a gentle smile on his resolute face. He always blamed himself for being poor at speaking and having a dull personality and was afraid that she would dislike him. Husband and wife are birds of the same forest, but they fly away separately when disaster strikes. Besides, she and my brother have never been husband and wife, so I have no right to blame her. Sister Wen, it is human nature to seek benefits and avoid harm. You are in a big family, and your situation is already difficult. You have no control over your words and actions. No one will blame you." She lowered her head, tears suddenly fell, and opened her palms to reveal the sachet. "This is the amulet I prayed for him at the Hugua Temple. But the battle was urgent that day, and by the time I desperately rushed to the city gate, the army had already left. Can you give it to him when you go to see him?" I shook my head. "The past is over. The future is bright. You should look forward." "I understand." She clenched her palms, held the sachet tightly, looked up and smiled at me. "Afu, please take care of yourself." She smiled with tears in her eyes. I want to go back and get married. 17. I opened a clinic in Lingchuan and recruited many people with disabilities. One of them was the most terrifying. He had a limp in one leg, and his left eye had been shot, leaving only a black hole. He covered it with an eye patch every day. His name is Aki. He was my brother's former deputy general. He fell into the Gold River during the battle and was rescued by someone. At first, when he went out to collect herbs, everyone avoided him and children would cry when they saw him. It was not until they learned that he was a soldier who had fought in the Battle of Hulao Pass that they gradually stopped being afraid of him. He is our great show hero. You say his face is scary? It's not scary, not scary. I tell you, he got hurt just to protect us. Brother Aki, do your eyes hurt? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt at all. Archie was talking to the little carrots somewhat awkwardly. Looking up at the eaves, it seemed like mist and drizzle were floating down from the aquamarine sky, like pearl curtains and jade screens, and silver beads knocking on tiles. I sat on the steps, feeling as if I had forgotten something. However, things that have no impression are probably not important. It was a dim day, and I saw a tall figure from afar, standing lonely in front of the clinic. He turned his head to look at me, with a graceful figure and a graceful shadow. I asked Chuntao, "Who is that person?" Chuntao gritted her teeth and said without hesitation, "You're a jerk." I looked at her with a frown, thinking that this man must have offended Chuntao, so I wouldn't like him either. "Affu." The man approached me and looked at me sadly with his eyes downcast. His address made me frown slightly, and I said coldly, "Sir, please respect yourself." He didn't have time to retract the astonishment on his face, and he said in a low voice, What did you say?" I said calmly, "Old age. I was ill and forgot a lot of things. I don't recognize you." His eyes trembled suddenly, and his face turned pale in an instant.
Impossible.
He choked and trembled all over. "You can't joke with me like this, no. How could you forget me? You remember Chun Xing, you remember Chun Tao, you remember so many irrelevant people. How could you forget me?" "Affu, you are punishing me, right? I already know I was wrong. This is the only wrong thing I have done in my life. You can punish me however you want, but you can't forget it. More than 10 years of love. How can you just forget it?" He stared into my eyes, his eyes instantly turned red with unwillingness and despair, and my chest felt like it was being pressed by a huge rock, pulling it hard and painfully. It's strange that he is so sad, but I am so calm. "Although I don't remember what you said." I paused, seeing hope in his eyes, and added, "But I hate you very much." I ignored him and walked into the museum. Behind him, Chuantao's petite figure stood majestically with her hands on her hips, not letting him take even a single step forward. "If you care, you should have known that our young lady was ill in Shidi. In order not to forget you, she drank 2 large bowls of bitter medicine every day, and she never gave up even when she vomited. In order to remember your past, she spent half a day, every day, writing it down word by word. She valued those books more than anything else. But in the end, she told you that she was ill, and you said she was lying. When she was burning those books, you were flirting with Miss Wen. It's a good thing that the young lady has forgotten you. I just hope that you, General Xie, will show mercy and stop disrupting our lives." Xie Heng's lips trembled. "I don't know. Why didn't you tell me? If I knew, I wouldn't. I can't live without her, Miss Chuntao." Chuntao said viciously, "Then why are you still alive now?" With red eyes, he rushed into the clinic, holding my shoulders tightly with both hands. "Where's the medicine? Where is the medicine?" Fu, you take the medicine. I will make medicine for you. You will remember after drinking it. Give me the prescription. I beg you to give me the prescription." Chun Tao shouted, "Burn them all. Burn them all. The eldest prince's wife of Shidi also died under your knife. There will be no more medicine for her in this life." Maybe it was because I was completely unfamiliar with him, but seeing him in so much pain, I still looked at him expressionlessly, watching his eyes gradually become gray. 18. From then on, that person would wait in front of the clinic every day before it opened. I never paid any attention to him, nor did I care what his name was. He didn't seem to dare to talk to me, but just followed me with his eyes. Gradually, he seemed to be settled in the spring water. Occasionally, when I went out to provide free medical treatment, he would follow me silently. Today was still the same. He was not far away and could not be caught up. There was a sudden commotion on the street. The frightened carriages rushed and crashed into the crowd and seemed to be about to overturn in the next second. In the chaos, I pushed Archie out, but his body could not withstand the impact of a carriage. My head was spinning, and I felt dizzy. My ears were filled with shrill sounds and whooshing noises, and as the world was spinning, a figure protected me underneath him, and I heard a clear sound of bones breaking. He broke his hand and sat in the clinic, looking at me eagerly and asking cautiously, "Miss Shen, are you okay?" I took out the silver and placed it before him as a reward for his salvation. He looked at the money on the table, fell into a long silence, and never said another word. Afterwards, he would always show up to find opportunities, but never overstep the boundaries, leaving people helpless. Every day before dawn, he would put down a pile of medicines in front of the clinic, and those medicines happened to be urgently needed or hard to come by. Every day, there are miracle doctors who come to Chunxue town to seek treatment for amnesia. He brought in one notebook after another, which were said to be filled with everything about me, written down stroke by stroke over several sleepless days and nights. I lowered my eyes, took a quick look, and said to Chuntao, "Take it and burn it." Hearing what I said, he squinted his eyes, put his fist to his lips, and suddenly couldn't stop coughing. The fire was burning brightly, and the booklet thrown in started to spark, but he reached out to pick it up without paying any attention. Holding the books in his red hands, he trembled and said, "Take a look." I said nothing and turned my back. After he left that day, Chuntao picked up a rumor from the capital and told her. It is said that there was a general named Xian Yuan in the capital who had an affair with a girl named Wen without any matchmaker or engagement, and they even had a child. But who would have thought that the general was reluctant to marry her until later, when Miss Wen's former lover from the countryside came to Dingjing and, failing to extort money from her, he revealed a secret. He said that Miss Wen had committed adultery with him in the countryside, and the child in her belly was his. He was doing the right thing, and did not want the heroic General Xie to remain in the dark. It was a big drama that attracted a lot of attention in Dingjing City. The Wen family was also despised because of this incident. It was said that the general's mother was so angry after being fooled that she accidentally fell into the lake and was unconscious when she was picked up. I was feeling sleepy while listening to them, and when I saw them smiling innocently, I shook my head. Chun Tao patted Aki on the shoulder and said, "Well done, Aki. They should be humiliated." When I went out, I met him again. He was wearing a long blue gown that was washed so much that it looked white. But today, he was completely different from the humble and cautious person he had been in the past few days. He had a terrifying and dignified look. "Afu, do I really disgust you so much that you don't even want to say a word to me? Since we were young, I have never forced you to do anything." A bloodless smile appeared on his lips. "Now, I am afraid I have to force you to stay by my side. I think one day, you will remember everything and your love for me. Hate or love, it is better than such indifference." I took a step back subconsciously, holding the poison that was enough to cause blindness in my hand. "Thank you, General." Archie limped over, holding his leg. "If you still remember what our Major General said before he left, you shouldn't have made things difficult for the young lady." Xia Hong remembered. Of course, he remembered the tragedy of that day. The man whom he regarded as a brother used up his last bit of strength to push him out of death. He screamed miserably, "Go! Go!" Thick blood covered his face, and when he opened his mouth, blood gurgled out. He said word by word with great difficulty, "Afu, my sister, must protect." I don't know what Archie said to him, but I know that man fled that day. 19. The next day, he reappeared with a pale face. Placing a basket of medicine at the door, he lowered his head and said in a hoarse voice, "I promised your brother that I would take good care of you for the rest of your life. I will not leave. For several days in a row, Chuntao was so angry that he even broke the broom. When I was thinking about whether to move away, he suddenly left, as quietly as he came. Only on the night he left, someone knocked on my window, 2 hard knocks and 1 light knock. The knocking technique was so familiar that I subconsciously opened the window. In the dark night, he was dressed in black, with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes, a stern face, and black hair tied into a high ponytail. The moment I opened the window, a trace of disbelief flashed across his face. "Afyu, I have to go out for something urgent. Can you wait for me to come back?" I missed Chuntao a little at this moment. If she were here, she would definitely scold him. I had to emphasize, "I don't know you. When will you understand this?" A light breeze blew, and it seemed to crush his back all of a sudden. "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't remember. Then when I come back, can we get to know each other again?" I shook my head firmly. "No." He didn't listen and said to himself, "Shen Fu, my name is Xieheng." Seeing that I didn't react, he seemed to lose his strength and said, "Word. Yanji." Perhaps there was someone in the past whom he would think of all the time when he was away. But I don't care where he is going or when he will come back. Compared to him, I may be more concerned about the new flowers planted in the yard yesterday. Life on Earth is short, but we have to cross thousands of mountains and rivers. War broke out again on the border, and it was said that the unfaithful and heartless General Xie led his troops to quell the rebellion. I picked the herbs in my hand. Durua is spicy and slightly warm, and Panax Noto ginseng is good at dissolving blood stasis. Human nature is truly complex. It can be ruthless and heartless, yet also loyal and courageous, and it cares about the world. It cannot be generalized in one word. I don't know how many years have passed in Chunshui town, nor do I know how many letters I have received that no one has responded to. The winter chill sweeps across the long streets, and the whole city is filled with spring. The war is over, the soldiers return home, and the whole nation celebrates. I heard that only General Xie never returned from this battle, and his whereabouts are unknown. Some people say that there is a kind of miraculous medicine growing on the Chiefing Cliff at the border that can make people recall their forgotten past. But that is only a legend. For hundreds of years, no one has ever set foot on the Chiefing Cliff shrouded in clouds and mist. Passers-by were talking endlessly, but I walked quickly and headed home. The sky is so dark, with thick clouds rolling in, and heavy rain is coming. The newly opened flowers in the yard cannot be exposed to rain.